What is going on, everyone? This is actually my first episode that I'm making for YouTube. So today is actually Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to every single mother out there watching. I do know that my audience is more women than it is men, even though it's both. And with that being said, I want to just thank you for everything that you guys do as a mother. We literally wouldn't be here without you guys, right? And I'm actually gonna go back to back and make a second episode for YouTube immediately after this one, talking about, quote, family dynamics and how they can be toxic. The quote should have been on the toxic part, but that's nonetheless. What I want to talk to you about right now is let's start at the beginning. If you've recently been diagnosed with any kind of anxiety disorder, depression disorder, bipolar disorder, personality disorder, anything of that nature, I really want to talk to you about how to receive that information and then what you might want to consider doing next. Right? We all have different opinions. Your doctor will have an opinion, your psychiatrist will have an opinion, your therapist, counselor, I'll have an opinion, Instagram will have an opinion, Google will have an opinion, your mom and dad will have an opinion, your friends have an opinion. But if you've been following me for any amount of time, my opinion, will come from a place of non-judgment. It'll come from a place of I don't like labels. It'll come from a place of understanding human emotions and human behavior from a place of understanding the whole human and the circumstances that we live in, not just your brain chemistry. And if that's helpful for you, that's what this episode is going to be about. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay. Whenever we're experiencing an emotion for a long amount of time, all that's really happening is we are being rewarded for the emotion. Okay, so let me take a step back. Yes, we are being rewarded for the emotion. However, how do we arrive to a diagnosis like this? Because 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even, there was not nearly the amount of diagnoses for these kinds of things as there are now. There just wasn't. But now it is a multi-billion-dollar industry to be selling these prescription medications, these drugs. And the challenge is all that they do is numb us. They don't actually take care of the real issue. And the real issue is this. Think about it this way. When we start to have limiting beliefs about what things mean in our life, right? We believe that because we went and had an anxiety attack in the car, anytime I get in the car means ultimate pain. So now when I think about getting pain, I freak out and have anxiety. When I'm at a restaurant, I had a bit of anxiety. So now I associate that going out to eat with my friends equals anxiety. And then every other thing begins to create anxiety for us. You could go to a psychiatrist and they will say you have generalized anxiety disorder because it makes you so dysfunctional throughout the day. You have a hard time going to work. It's messing up your relationships. It's doing all these things. But what I would say is it's simply your nervous system has gotten wired in a way where the way that you view life creates the fight or flight response within you. And if we look at it from that perspective, we can absolutely move through it and rewire our brain to just be functioning, firing differently. If that makes sense, give me 2 seconds while I take a sip of my coffee. And if it didn't make sense, you still had to wait because I still took the sip of coffee. So you've just recently been diagnosed with, let's say, generalized anxiety disorder. What does that really mean? What that means from my perspective is that you have developed what I call an emotional home. That's it. You've developed what I call an emotional home. So going back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this episode, there are only 6 human needs, okay? And anytime our brain associates that by feeling something, believing something, experiencing something, being around someone, anything meets at least 3 of these needs at one time. With a belief, a thought, a feeling, a person, doesn't matter. Our brain will get rewarded for it and want to do more of that thing or experience more of that thing. Let me give you this example. How many of you have ever met someone, man or woman, doesn't matter, you met someone and you were so excited by them, you're intrigued by them, you were interested by them, you felt comfortable around them. There was this mystery to them. You felt connected. And then when you left, when you parted the conversation or you parted being in that proximity with them, you kept thinking about that. Have you had a moment like that? I want you to notice it's because a few of these 6 human needs are being met by that person. And so your brain found another way to meet its needs, this person. So when you left the conversation or you parted ways physically, your brain was like, oh shit, but I want to keep meeting my needs. I was just meeting at least 3 of my needs over here. So now we just keep thinking about that person. That happens with emotions. That happens with people, romantic partners or friends. That happens with business ideas. That happens with projects. That happens with TV shows. How many of you ever watch a TV show where at the very end of the show, you're like, oh, I have no time to watch another one, but I have to know how this one ends. Like, I got to know how this thing gets resolved. So you put on the next episode because that TV show is meeting at least 3 of your needs. So you go, Tyler, well, how does any of this relate to anxiety or my diagnosis that I've newly been given? Because it's not that you have this diagnosis, if you want a second opinion at least. It's coming from the fact that you felt anxious about a few things and your brain unconsciously linked up in your mind that by experiencing this really brutal emotion, you're meeting at least 3 of your needs. And so it's not like your brain's like, oh my God, this feels so good. It's that your brain's needs are being met. And so it unconsciously is pulled to want to keep feeling that emotion because it believes the needs will be met. I'll give you an example. Had a client a few years ago. I give this example a lot because it's very potent and it's so simple at the same time. So I'm sure you'll relate to some degree, or you'll at least understand intellectually this pattern. This woman and this man had a great relationship, and about 6 years in, he started getting advancements in his work, and so he spent more time there, right? Where his focus went, his energy went, and he spent more time there. As he spent more time there, the wife didn't quite feel as seen and understood and appreciated and like she was giving all the attention. Like, ladies, how important is attention to you really? From a masculine man or just the man that you love? How important on a scale from 0 to 10 is the attention of that man to you? Most women, when they're being honest, it's like a 9 or 10 or 12. He was not giving her attention at the same level because he had just other things on his mind. She carried on, but one day she had a panic attack. And because this man still loves her, he came running to her attention because he was so fucking concerned. So concerned. So he came running to her attention. And what happened? Her brain was like, wait a second. I've been trying for years to get him to re-engage in this relationship, to be present with me, to just give me his full attention, his undivided attention, because that lights me up like a Christmas tree, and nothing has worked. But now I'm feeling like my needs are being met. I'm being seen. I feel safe. I feel understood for the first time in a long time. I feel certainty. I feel a sense of variety that I have for a long time. I feel significant to him. I feel connected with him. There are 4 needs being met there. Her brain unconsciously linked up that by having panic attacks, she could get his attention. And so subconsciously, this was reinforced. Now, we could have said that this was generalized anxiety disorder. We could have said this was PTSD and then looked for the trauma from the past. We could have said it was like many different things, but the truth of the matter is, it doesn't really matter where it came from. What matters is how it's being rewarded. Because let's go back to this woman for a second. We could go back and solve the problem that gave her that like overwhelming anxiety in the first place, but it's not going to matter because it's being reinforced by something different now. Is that making sense? So let's say it was something at her work, or it was the kids, or it was something with her family. that made her so overwhelmed she had an anxiety attack. Sure, that was what maybe started it. But the fact that it was rewarded somewhere else tells me that even if we resolve this problem, even if we resolve this problem that this woman had that created the anxiety attack in the first place, doesn't matter because it's being rewarded somewhere else. So you solve that problem, but it's going to keep going because the brain learned these anxiety attacks are getting me my needs met. So if you want to know, if you want a second opinion, so to speak, my opinion on how to process the information of being told you have generalized anxiety disorder or panic disorder or PTSD or anything of that nature, here's what I would say. Take it with a grain of salt. It's just an emotional pattern, and our emotions are just learned responses. Like I said with that woman, unconsciously, she learned that by having this anxiety, her husband came closer together where she didn't know how to get his attention another way. So she learned unconsciously that's the way to meet her needs. That's it. That's all it is. So let's look at it this way. Okay, let's look at it this way. There are only 3 decisions that human beings are always making, and we're going to apply them to how you can think about this diagnosis you've been given. Okay? 3 decisions we're always making. Number 1, what am I going to focus on? Am I going to focus on the problem or the solution? Am I going to focus on what's in my control or what's out of my control? Am I going to focus on what I want or what I don't want? Other people or myself? There's so many different things we can focus on. But once we've decided what we're going to focus on, we have to give that thing a meaning. What does this mean? Does it mean it's the end or the beginning? Does it mean it's a problem or an opportunity? Does it mean you're in trouble or I don't know what the opposite of trouble is. The opposite of trouble, right? What does it mean? Because the meaning that you attach to the thing that you're focusing on is going to produce the emotion. So you could yell at me right now, and let's say that's what I'm focusing on is you yelling at me, okay? If I decide that you yelling at me means that you're in pain, I'm not going to be upset at all, and I'm just going to feel compassion for you. That's it. If when you yell at me, I decide that that means I'm a piece of shit who's unlovable, I'm going to feel very anxious and depressed. The meaning that we give to it determines the emotion. And then the third decision is, what are we going to do? So we're focused on this. We've now given it a meaning. That meaning creates the emotion. And then from that emotional state is where we decide, what am I going to do? And if you've decided this means that you suck, or this means it's the end for you, or this means you're broken, or this means you're unlovable, or this means you'll never have the opportunity, or this means whatever it might mean to you, if it means something negative, you're going to go into a negative emotional state. And then from there, what you decide to do is going to be extremely unresourceful. Extremely unresourceful. So what I would suggest that you do is, if you've been diagnosed with some kind of disorder, change the meaning. What does it really mean that you've been diagnosed with this disorder? If it was me, I would say, no, this doesn't mean I'm broken. This doesn't mean I have a disorder. This means that I've learned an emotional response, and unfortunately, just in the moment, it's become a habit. So out of that, what am I going to decide to do? Third question. I'm going to break the habit. That's it. Now you could say, well, Tyler, what if it's bipolar? What if it is major depressive disorder? What if it is another kind of disorder? I just seen that vegan someone entered my live stream. I love that. I'm vegan too. What's up? I lost train of thought. If it's another disorder, same thing. You get to decide what this means to you, if you even accept it, and therefore how you respond. So you can respond by accepting medication that numbs your nervous system, which allows you to feel less. You can decide that this means that you're going to do more research, that you could decide that this means nothing at all and they're wrong, and you just have an emotional pattern, or pardon me, an emotional response that is turned into a habit because it's unfortunately been reinforced. I can break that habit. These decisions are what you really need to pay attention to. What are you going to focus on? What does this mean to you? And what are you going to do? If you've just recently been I'm stuttering. If you've just recently been diagnosed with any kind of disorder, before you accept it as your identity, okay, my suggestion is you say, you know what, I'm going to take a step back for a second and say, this is not who I am. It's something I've learned. So I'm going to unlearn this pattern. I'm going to choose to respond differently to my life and watch how fast I no longer have a disorder, and I can go about my life enjoying my life. I can feel like myself again. I can feel normal. But here is the part I want to warn you about. If you take this disorder on as if it's your identity, hear me now. The strongest force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with the way that we define ourselves. If you accept a definition of yourself as an anxious person or a person who has this disorder, if that becomes like your thermostat, so to speak, you will always come back there no matter what therapy you do, no matter what drugs you take, no matter what you do, no matter what. Because think about this. If your thermostat for your identity, so to speak, is 68 degrees, and then you start doing better than that, you start doing 69 degrees, 71, 73 degrees, 79, and you just keep going up, eventually your brain's going to go, hey, Tyler, you're not an 80 degreer, you're a 68 degreer, get your ass down there. So the heaters will kick off, and if that's not enough, the air conditioning will turn on to bring you right back to where you believe you are, back to who you believe you are. If you accept this as your identity, it's over. It's over. So if you want the second opinion, ask yourself, number one, is it really true? Is it really true that I have a disorder? Or maybe was I misdiagnosed? Or maybe is that a stupid diagnosis that really doesn't have any basis in reality and it's just an emotional pattern? It's up for you to decide.